Welcome. Now we are in section B of paper 2 from the state of Terengganu. So this is question 6. It's showing the structure of nephron in human kidney. So as usual, I would like to just do a brief recap regarding the major parts of this structure here. So A, this one would be the Bowman's capsule, and it is used most commonly for the ultrafiltration. And over here you have also the afferent arteriole, which is the input, and the output is at the afferent arteriole. And this structure here is the glomerulus. Here you have the proximal convoluted tubule, where reabsorption is the most active. And further down you have the loop of Henle, which also have active reabsorption occurring. And further up here you have distal convoluted tubule, where most of the secretion occurs, and this is then the renal tubules. So proximal tubule, remember proximal means is nearer to the body. Proximal means distal means is much further away. Alright, so with that, let us move on to the question. So here you are given 6 marks to explain the formation of urine that occurs at A, B, and C. So A is Bowman's capsule, B is proximal convoluted tubule, and C is distal convoluted tubule. So let's look at the answers for this one here. So 6A. So the first point you can put, because they are A, B, and C, so you're given 6 marks, so you can have 1 point, 3 points followed by 3 explanations. So the first one is, you can say ultrafiltration occurs at Bowman's capsule, and then followed by your explanation. So 1, the afferent arteriole has larger diameter than the afferent arteriole. So remember this point, afferent is larger than afferent. And then the next point will be, because of this difference in the diameter, it will produce high hydrostatic pressure in the glomerulus, and this would force the water and also other small molecules to diffuse across the membrane into the Bowman's capsule. And this is where the ultrafiltration occurs. And this filtrate, as additional point, you can say, does not contain plasma protein or red blood cells. The second point, which is occurring at B, is reabsorption. So reabsorption occurs at the proximal convoluted tubule. So you have to state what is the structure, because it's not shown in the diagram. And this should give you 1 point. And the explanation is, during this process, water, sodium, and glucose in the filtrate are reabsorbed into the blood capillary. And the last one, C, and this is where the secretion occurs. So you can say secretion occurs at distal convoluted tubule, and the explanation is, in this process, waste and excess substances, for example urea, they are secreted via passive diffusion as well as active transport or active process into distal convoluted tubule. So this will be the 6 points that you can put in for the first part. Second part of the question says, kidney failure often occurs in human, and you are required to explain the cause of this condition and how this is treated. For this, the 4 marks are allocated. So you can say, for the first part, the cause. So the cause of kidney failure is of course due to excess salt, and as well as carbohydrate and protein. And excess carbohydrate, for example, produces high glucose level, and this will increase the pressure in the proximal convoluted tubule. So this would be the cause. As for treatment for kidney failure, first one that comes to mind will be hemodialysis, and you need to then explain what is hemodialysis. So this method basically uses an dialysis machine to remove waste products, for example urea, from the blood. And moreover, besides the hemodialysis, one other alternative would be to undergo kidney transplant by receiving a kidney from a suitable donor. So this will be the points for this question. And the next part here, you are given 10 marks to explain the mechanism of osmoregulation. If a person, one, drink too much water, and the second one, eat too much salty food. So once again, always look into the diagram, and as usually the diagram will provide some useful hint as well as useful keywords that you can use for your answers. So here you are given two conditions with 10 marks, so you can more or less divide them to 5 marks each. And also here, to make it easier, you can imagine here you have already too much water, so you can imagine this one, too much salty food, would also be the same as having too little water. So just work on the same condition, you should be able to answer this question. So let's put this additional information onto our diagram so that it's easier to follow our answer later on. So let's start with too much water. So too much water starts here. What happens to the normal blood osmotic pressure? If you have too much water, it will then leads to a drop in the blood osmotic pressure, and this stimulus is transmitted to the hypothalamus. So if you have a drop in the blood osmotic pressure, the osmoreceptor will be less stimulated, and this information will then be sent to the pituitary glands. So here you have less stimulated, so this would be also less stimulated, because there is less stimulation of the pituitary gland or the adrenal gland. You would have less secretion of ADH, and if you have less secretion of ADH, what will happen to the distal convoluted tubule and also the collecting ducts? You would have less water less permeability towards water, and because you have less water, this will increase the blood osmotic pressure again, and then you will have it back to the normal levels. So when you have it drop, with this entire process, you will help to increase the blood osmotic pressure to normal levels again. So the too much salt would be the same as too little water, so this will be kind of the exact opposite of what happens of too much water. So this will be like a 3 points here. Too much salt, then if you have a drop, you will have a rise, and if you have a rise in this will be detected and it will be more stimulated. So the osmoreceptor in the hypothalamus will be more stimulated, which means the pituitary gland will be more stimulated. If the pituitary gland is more stimulated, there will be more secretion of the ADH, and if you have more secretion of the ADH, this would increase the permeability of distal convoluted tubule as well as collecting ducts, and with this you would then have more water coming into the blood, and this would then drops down the blood osmotic pressure, and with this you should then get back your normal blood osmotic pressure. So this would be 5 points in green and then another 5 points in blue. So how do we put this into the answer? So here you can have C1, which is too much water, and 6C2 will be too much salty food or too less water. So first, the blood osmotic pressure drops below normal range. Number 2, the osmoreceptor in the hypothalamus and the pituitary glands are less stimulated. Because they are less stimulated, less ADH is secreted, and because you have less ADH, the distal convoluted tubule and also the collection ducts will be less permeable to water, and because of that you have less water absorption. Because you have less water, the blood osmotic pressure will go up, and this will then return the blood osmotic pressure to normal range. So you have it, the first part. For the second part, write exactly the same but the opposite. So if you compare the keywords in green to the ones in blue, you will realize they are essentially the opposite. So here you have, for example, number 1, blood osmotic pressure. That one previously was dropped, so now it rises below normal range. above normal range actually, so there's a typo here. The osmoreceptor in the hypothalamus and the pituitary glands are now more stimulated. Because it's more stimulated, you have more ADH, and if you have more ADH, the permeability in the distal convoluted tubules and collection ducts will be more permeable, and because it's more permeable to water, of course you will have more absorption of water, and because of more water, this would drops the blood osmotic pressure, and therefore this would return back to the normal range. So in this particular section, in this particular question, is already very helpful from the help from the diagram. So always try to make use of the diagram and think of it or answer your question in a logical step-by-step manner. So in most cases, you would be able to answer it one after another, such as this, like 1, blood osmotic pressure rise. What happens after that? It will be less, the glands will be, the osmoreceptor will be less stimulated, and then it will lead to, more stimulated, and it will lead to more ADH. More ADH will lead to more permeability of the tubules, and then this will lead to more water. So all of them are step by step.